choose to go, you're already there. And if I go to the heavens, rise on the wings of dawn, if I settle by the sea, I know your hand is always there to guide me. You are there, you are there, you are there, you are there. Where can I go from your presence? Trouble is in my way, you're already there. You will not go from my presence. Before a word of mine is said, if in the depths I lay my head, in the shadow of your wings you're there to hide me. You are there, 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 you are there. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. 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 I've got the joy of the Lord.
I heard the voice of Jesus say, "Come unto me and rest. Lay down now, weary one, lay down thy head upon my breast." I came to Jesus as I was. my soul relaxed, and now I live with him.
Hello, welcome to our Bible study. My name is Clint McElroy, and today we'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 9. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Masks will be provided at the door for anyone who needs one. If you're sick in any way, please don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. We'll have classes for all ages at 9 a.m., so please join us for those if you can, and you're welcome to join us in the auditorium at 9 to watch this class on the large screen. We want to make sure everyone is aware that we have these English Standard Versions from the World Bible School available for anyone who'd like to have one. If you'd like to have one, please contact our church office and we'll make arrangements to get you one. We have many sick on the list, so please refer to our bulletin for more information. We want to keep in our prayers Mary Ann Kinsey, who's preparing for surgery, as well as April Askew, who's also preparing for surgery, Jeff Krim, Betty Hart, Clint Book, Camden and Caden Wilson, Chuck Brazil, Sarah Amix, and Donnie Glenn Dixon. As is our custom, we want to remember the story of the two men on the road to Emmaus who were joined by a third man on the way. When they got to their destination, they realized that third man was Jesus, and he departed from them. They realized in his absence that while he was with them, there had been a burning in their hearts. It's that burning that they had in their hearts that we hope to kindle in our own hearts as we come closer to the Lord through a study of his word. We want to remember the admonitions of Leviticus chapter 19, to be holy for the Lord our God is holy. And we go to the scripture to find out what to be holy means, what it means to set ourselves apart for service to the Lord. And finally, we want to remember the stories of Rehoboam, Jeroboam, and the prophet that came to Jeroboam. Rehoboam lost the northern kingdom because of a judgment upon Solomon, but he did so through an act of foolishness that is worthy of consideration. Jeroboam had been promised the northern kingdom while Solomon was still on the throne. When Solomon passed and Jeroboam returned, he received the northern kingdom and became its king. Instead of doing as the Lord had instructed him, he chose to depart from the Lord's instruction and raised up high places in the mountains and a false priesthood to support a worship there of what he called the God that led the people out of Egypt. He recreated the God of Israel. He made adjustments to the instructions that the people should follow, and this was a bane upon the people of Israel until the time of Christ. God just didn't let him do that. He sent a prophet to tell him not to do that. That prophet came and availed himself of his instructions, and he was on the last step. He was going home, and he believed a lie told to him by another prophet, and because he believed a lie on that way home and did not follow the last instruction, his life was forfeit. God took his life. It's a terrible thing to realize that being deceived is in of itself a sin when we have the option to not be deceived. When we can find out that the truth says one thing and we choose to believe a lie instead, we are doing something that the Lord does not find acceptable. We need to make sure that when we choose to believe something, it is in accord with God's instruction. So that's why we study. That's why we go to God's Word, to look to find what God would have us do to be His servants, what God would have us do as His servants. So I hope you'll join me today as we enter into this study of 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9 from the English Standard Version. And David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet." The king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodebar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodebar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, what is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I? Verse 9. Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, According to all that my lord the king commands his servants, so will your servants do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, whose name was Micah, and all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet. Okay, so last week we studied chapter 8 after having reviewed again chapter 7. In chapter 8, David defeats many of his enemies, many of the enemies of the people of Israel, I should say. They weren't his personal enemies so much as enemies of the people of Israel. First, David defeats the Philistines and subdued them in verse 1 of chapter 8, and took Metheg-ammah out of the hand of the Philistines. Then in verse 2, he defeated Moab, and it says it measured him with a line in verse 2, making them lie down on the ground. 2 lines he measured to be put to death, and 1 full line to be spared. And the Moabites became servants to David and brought tribute. So last week I described this as possibly lining up the people in 3 different lines and having killed 2/3 of the people. And certainly that would be an awful, awful thing to have done. But I read some commentaries in the past week, and according to those commentaries, this was more likely a height measurement, and in which case there would have likely been a lot fewer people killed. More likely this would have killed many of the larger men who were more capable warriors. So this was a way of removing the military might of the Moabites, and the people who were left became servants to David and brought tribute. Then in verse 3 it says that he defeated Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah, as he went to restore power at the river Euphrates. So the river Euphrates is to the east of Israel, and for some reason in my head it was to the southeast. And this land of Zobah was most likely, I think it's probably well understood, to be to the northeast of the lands of Damascus, those lands that Damascus oversaw. So this was a different area than what I perceived of as being the area last week, but still a significant area. And the wealth of Hadadezer is not to be underestimated because of the descriptions that are provided here. It says that David took from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers, and hamstrung all the chariot horses, but left enough for 100 chariots. Then the Syrians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, and David struck down 22,000 men of the Syrians. So the Syrians sat kind of between a significant portion of Israel and what I perceive now to be the area that Zobah occupied. Now, according to other references and other locations where this story is recounted, this area would have been an area that had been relegated to Israel by the Lord's promise. So the area between the river of Egypt and the river of the Euphrates was area that was supposed to be the promised land. And of that area, Israel rarely occupied much of it. So they only occupied a small portion of any of this land, most of it being west of the Jordan throughout most of the history of Israel. So for a period of time, there were tribes to the east of the Jordan, but as time goes by, we hear less and less about that in the scripture, and mostly we hear about those areas to the west of the Jordan. Continues in verse 6 saying that David put garrisons in Aram of Damascus, and the Syrians also became servants to David and brought tribute. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. In verse 7 it says that David took the shields of gold that were carried by the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Beta and from Berothah, cities of Hadadezer, David took very much bronze. So David was able to take much spoils from the kingdom of Zobah. In verse 9 it continues that Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the whole army of Hadadezer. And Toi sent his son Joram to King David to ask about his health and to bless him because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him. For Hadadezer had often been at war with Toi, and Joram brought with him articles of silver and gold and of bronze. These also King David dedicated, it says in verse 11, to the Lord, together with the silver and gold that he dedicated from all the nations he subdued, from Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, Amalek, from the spoil of Hadadezer to the son of Rehab, king of Zobah. So David had made a name for himself in verse 13 when he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt, and he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put garrisons, it says. So in my mind, I did not look this up, but in my mind the valley of Salt is near the location of the Dead Sea, and a lot of people have indicated, and things that I've read, that is likely the location where Sodom and Gomorrah had existed before they were annihilated by the Lord in Genesis. And it says that all the Edomites became David's servants, and the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. At the end of verse 14. In verse 15 it says, David reigned over all Israel. David administered justice and equity to all his people, and it lists his officers and different people that served in different roles as he was king. And I'm assuming this is specific to this time. Then we go on into chapter 9, our reading today. David said in verse 1, Is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? David had been blessed greatly, and he still remembered his love for Saul's household, and specifically the great friendship that Jonathan had with him, and he wanted to show his gratitude and God's gratitude to whatever remnant he could find of Saul's household. But God had done a very good job of wiping out Saul's descendants. So there was a servant, it says in verse 2, of the house of Saul, whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And King David said to him, Are you Ziba? And he said, I am your servant. And David said, Is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him? Ziba said to the king, There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. The king said to him, Where is he? And Ziba said to the king, He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar. Then David sent for him and brought him from there. And it says in verse 6, Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth answered, Behold, I am your servant. And David said to him, Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. So Mephibosheth had a great reason to fear in this time, and many, many times throughout the ages, kingdoms were taken over by new kings by the annihilation of the previous king and all of his family, so that no member of that family would remain in order to claim the throne. So Mephibosheth had a good reason to be afraid. But instead, he asks, it says in verse 8, And he paid homage and said, What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I? So he recognized his low estate. He recognized that he was of all men most lowly, because most people in his situation would be sought after to be put to death, not to be honored and recognized in the way that David wanted to recognize him. So it said in verse 9 that the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson, which I'm sure was not the greatest news to Ziba. I'm not sure what role Ziba played as a servant of Saul in the interim, but likely he was still running the grounds and still maintaining everything, still making sure that all the provisions that were created for Saul's household were still being created, because that's how all the servants of Saul's household sustained themselves. They had to have those things for their own preservation. So This may well have come as not the greatest news in the world to Ziba. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. And there's a great difference between the measure of what David was calling Ziba to do and what the necessity that was being met by David's statement were. There's a big difference between what would be brought in from Saul's lands and what Mephibosheth needed to sustain himself. But this is what David said. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants, so there alone there were quite a number of people that had to be sustained. Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servants, so will your servant do. What a powerful thing a king is. What a powerful thing it is to be able to say to someone, you shall essentially become slaves to this crippled man who cannot sustain himself, and you will be this for him for the rest of your lives. And it continues, Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons, and Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table, and he was lame in both of his feet. Mephibosheth's role in their society would have been very, very low. As a crippled man, he would have been very much like what we read of in the New Testament when the Lord encountered people who were crippled. They were often beggars in the street. Mephibosheth had some resource or value in and of himself because others were at that point still taking care of him. And why, I'm not sure, because he would have been a detriment to them had the king had hostility toward him and had sought him to be put to death, and these people would have been in peril themselves for aiding him and sustaining him. It's an incredible story of David's love for Jonathan, for David's love for Saul and his household. David remembered the good things, the goodness of what he had experienced from Saul's household, and he wanted to show God's honor that he had received to Saul's household, to remember the great and wonderful relationship that he had had with Jonathan, who had loved him so dearly. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful thing. And the story of Mephibosheth is not done. We'll see more about Mephibosheth later on. And it's not all that great. But this point is a good place. It's a good place for David's life. David had received these blessings from the Lord. He'd been victorious over the enemies of Israel. The people recognized that he was a servant of the Lord who not only served the Lord, but served the people's needs and sought to preserve the people's security and sought to do things that lifted up the people on the whole and didn't seek his own and didn't seek to raise himself up as one who needed power to direct over the people, although he could clearly exercise it as he did towards Ziba. We will see these names again later on. We'll go on next time into the story that I talked about last week. Again, we'll revisit Hadadezer, some of these same names that we read out of the previous chapter. Upon reading and rereading this and looking at some commentaries in which I did find that other people share my confusion about these names being repeated in such a way in chapter 10 as after the events of chapter 8 had unfolded, it occurs to me that this is a different story, and I don't know this for certain still, but this seems like it's a different time, and we'll address this a little bit further, and we'll try to draw in the similarities to the stories out of First Chronicles. The story of Mephibosheth is not in this story that we read out of chapter 9 is not in First Chronicles to my knowledge. I have not found it there. Of course, I have not yet fully read through all of First Chronicles for this study, and I could yet be wrong, have been in the past. But I don't think that it is there at all. Many things were left out of First Chronicles, again, because First Chronicles was written for a different purpose than was these books of the Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. So to a large extent, they tell them in a different way, and obviously they were written at different times, and they serve different purposes. I hope you found a word of encouragement in today's story. Certainly, the love that David had toward Mephibosheth is indicative of the love that the Lord has for all of us. We are all, in many ways, a Mephibosheth to the Lord. We all receive these blessings from the Lord that are unwarranted. We certainly don't deserve the grace that the Lord has visited upon us, and we should be grateful for that grace, and we should live lives that reflect that. So I hope that you were encouraged by this story today. We may or may not be able to continue this next week. Certainly the holidays are going to be impactful, so I hope you will bear with me in that. In any event, I hope that you will have a Merry Christmas, and if I don't get to speak to you next week, a Happy New Year. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Hope to see you there. If you're sick in any way, please don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. God bless. Have a great week.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him.
My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God.
I will call upon the Lord.
I will call on the Lord.
Who is worthy to be
Who
praised?
is worthy to be
So
praised?
shall I be saved from my
Shall I be
enemies.
saved from my enemies?
The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. Jesus Christ, He died for me.
Jesus Christ, He died for me.
And He took away my sin.
And He took away my sin.
I will live with Him for eternity.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. I will call